Hi everyone, welcome to the new episode of your Frederick podcast. My name is Gary and I'm your host for tonight. So, just as usual, go sit down, go grab your popcorn, your juice, your apple juice or orange juice, or as I always say, whatever it takes for you to relax, because today we are just about to go sailing in a very controversial topic that is none other than grammar. Okay, yes, you just didn't hear me wrong. I said grammar. Okay, so what is the relevance of grammar, and is it really important? Is it really necessary to learn a new language, to learn a second or even a third language? So that's the question we're gonna pose here today, and the answer we're gonna try to find. All right. Well, just as usual, I will be bringing my own opinions, my personal views on the subject. All right. I would really like to know yours. Okay, your opinion on it, if it's worked or if it hasn't worked out for you as a student or as a teacher. All right. But as I said, it is in fact a really controversial topic because basically. Well, judging from my experience as a tutor, as a teacher, as an English teacher, I've met lots of teachers who find very important, very precise, the usage of grammar in the classes, and others that totally disagree, that think that there's no room for grammar these days, and prefer to have a more dynamic approach, a more communicative approach, as they say. Anyways, the point here is the first question we should be addressing right now is, what is grammar? Okay, what is it basically? Well, grammar, in making a long story short, is the language of the language, right? So the way we approach and study the structure of a language, and naming each one of the points. And by structure, I mean behaviors, characteristics in general. So this is what I define grammar, okay, in very simple words. So why would it be necessary or unnecessary in the class? That's what we are about to find out together. So stick with me. I'll be back in a few seconds. Well, another question that I forgot saying in the first part that usually pops up is, why does grammar exist? Who invented it? Okay, I don't know if there's a simple and easy answer to this question, an objective answer to this question, but it's been invented because of necessity, just like everything else we have, or almost everything else we have in the world. Because it is necessary at the end of the day when we're talking about, as I said, characteristics of and features of a language. It is necessary to address names, like to name names, as they say. Because if we don't do that this way, it gets really hard, not to say impossible, to do that. Okay, so it is important to have labels, quote unquote labels. It is important having names to things, and that's exactly why grammar exists. Okay, so that's no surprise, but it's not impossible to learn a language without learning grammar. Okay, it is totally possible, and everyone does that. But anyways, I'm gonna be more specific about this point further on this podcast. But that's it. That's the reason why grammar exists. Okay, it's not something school, came out with just to have students stuck in a classroom. Although it looks like this way sometimes. But yeah, that's it. So going straight away to the question: should one, as a teacher, use grammar while teaching? Let's put English in this example, or on the other end. The student, should he or she consider grammar as something important when for their learning journey? My answer to this question, ladies and gentlemen, is yes, and no. Yeah, yes and no. Okay. So why yes and no? Because it is one of the things that boils down to the big it depends case. Well, as I always say, learning a language is such an individual journey, okay, and it's such a delicate process that really doesn't have any other it doesn't have any comparisons, because each journey is individual. So the way you learn a language is not the way I learn, and not the way your friends learn, and so on. So it's putting it in a short way. It's not even fair to say that you should or you shouldn't use, okay? But let's cut to the average, all right? The average student, okay? And again, I'm bringing here my experience as a teacher, all right? So taking the average student, I would say more yes than no, yeah? But of course, before I move on, it's very, very indispensable to say that one thing is addressing grammar, another is having classes 1000% focus in grammars. I've never done that, maybe at the beginning of my career as a teacher, but it's needless to say that this is wrong, this is bad, this is negative to the student, right? Because no matter how important one may consider like grammar to be, it's not 100% of the language, and 99% of the students, 99.9% of the students just want to speak, just want to master the language in a real way, not in a practical way, not in a theoretical way, okay? So when I say addressing or using grammar in the classes, I don't mean like using 100% grammar, only theoretical classes. No, just using it as a reference, okay, while explaining stuff, okay? I say that because there are some teachers, there's no easy way to say that, but they seem to me a little radical, like they don't use grammar at all, okay? Because they start from the understanding that we all learn the first language without grammar, which is not an opinion, it's a fact, okay? It's an observable fact, all right? Okay, I get it, I understand, but I still disagree, okay? I don't think that this explains, this is no matter how true this statement is, I don't think that this alone should, lead us into the oblivion of grammar. That is, throwing grammar away and never ever using it again in classes. The reason why I say that is because when we learn a first language, it's a so unique experience, okay? But at the same time, it is a collective experience, meaning, as I just said, the way you learn a second language is such an individual path, such an individual event, that there's no comparison between, peers, right? There are similarities, lots of them, of course, but not comparison, not 100%, pairing, but when it comes to the way we all learn our first languages, I would say it's pretty much the same, Of course, save the specifics, save the details, save the specific individual experiences and environment that everyone has, of course. But the essence is pretty much the same. So what is this essence I'm talking about? And I really want to be short on this because this is not the focus here. But the essence is, we can have one episode only about it if you guys want it, but that's not it. The essence here is we emulate what adults and what grown-ups, are speaking around us, what our family members are speaking around us. Simple and plain, and our brain is like 100% clear, so to say, right? There's an expression to it. I think it's a clean slate. Yeah, our brain was a clean slate, is a clean slate when we're babies, So that's it, In very simple, I'm being very pretty much of a simplifier here just so we can move on, right? So, but I'm saying that to say that it's not a fair comparison when you say like, hey, because we as babies learn our first languages without a single, piece of grammar, the same should happen when you're learning a second language in the future, right? And no matter how early in the future, right? Like when you're 12, when you're 10. Of course, the earlier, I would say, the more similar to the first language learning process, and the more similar, the more needless is grammar in fact, right? At least at the beginning of the learning process. But anyways, but just as I said, at least at the beginning, I come to think that even with our first language, we sooner than later, we learn grammar of our language, right? Of course, it's not something that will lead us to forget what we've learned, to erase a language from our brain, so to say, if we don't learn it. But it's indisputable that it brings our communication skills to a whole new level when we do that, right? Like you know the language, but then you realize what it looks like on the paper, letters and words and stuff. It is like something that really changes, a game changer in the speaking process. But anyways, as I said, bottom line here is I don't think it's a fair comparison. Okay, one thing is learning the first language, one thing is even learning a language when you're really young, younger than 12. And another completely different is learning a new language as an adult, as a grown-up, okay? So how to give a reasonable usage of grammar, how to have a reasonable usage of grammar in our learning process, that is using only the necessary and no more, no less. Well, again, this also comes down to the it depends thing. Okay, the first point I would like to stress out here is like, what is the profile, the student's profile, okay? What is your student profile, looking from the student's perspective, and what is the student's profile looking through the teacher's perspective in this sense, right? If the student is a more methodic, a more traditional student, okay, and believe me, there's lots of them out there, all right? Not all students are, youngsters, so to say, like dynamics, that they want to learn it in practice and with actual and practical terms. Not all of them. Some of them are pretty, for lack of a better word, robotic, okay? I would say myself included, surprisingly enough. I'm a little methodic when it comes to learning language. Learning a new language, but anyways, that's something I will even have to think about to speak more about. Anyways, if the student's more traditional student, grammar will be necessary, and to try to be a little more specific here, the older the student, the more methodic, traditional they tend to be, okay? Of course, exceptions, but in general, the average will require more grammar, right? And also, if we're talking about a language that is much different from your L1, that is your mother language, grammar becomes more and more necessary in these cases, putting it, in the bottom line. The more different a language is from your first language, the more you need grammar. Why? To explain the contrast between the two languages, your first language and the language you're learning. Okay, I know they're language professionals and researchers of the area who say that maybe a translation is all you need. You don't really have to understand the specifics between the way in between the way while learning a second language. But I again tend to disagree with these statements here, okay? Because I don't know, maybe I'm taking myself as a student too much in consideration when I say that. But I like understanding the whys, behind the ways of speaking, like for example, take the present perfect, for English students. It is something that does not exist in Portuguese, at least not in Brazilian Portuguese. I am confident that in Portuguese from Portugal, it doesn't exist either, right? So every time I have to teach my students the present perfect, I do this through layers. I never, and I would say that no teacher ever would do that. But I never try to. I don't try to teach them in only one class. Okay, I take like lots of classes and I go little by little introducing the concept. Okay, inserting the concept into the students' understanding, so to say. But by saying that, it is really, I would say, impossible to do that without grammar. Without like bringing up things like, hey, this is an auxiliary verb and that is a pronoun. This is a verb tense. Which are things that we don't come to think, no matter how literate we are, no matter how if we went or not to school. We don't stop to think about it, right? But as learners, we have to stop to think. We have to take this into consideration, right? I tell my students that, yeah, you have to think about it right now, but when it gets to you, when you internalize this concept and it becomes something like second nature, something natural for you, you won't have to think about it anymore. You won't have to think like, hey, this is an auxiliary verb. You just do it naturally, right? Just like riding a bicycle, basically. At the beginning, you have to be a little more theoretical on it. But as soon as you learn it, you don't even it's not even important to remember what you've learned. It's the practice that is more important, right? So I'm not saying that you should stick with grammar forever as a student. But if you're curious, if you're a linguistics enthusiast at some level, right, it will be inevitable for you to keep it, to keep considering your adverbs, verbs, and pronouns, etc. Everlasting. I would say that. And of course, again, the closer the language is, the language you've been learning is to your first language, the less necessary grammar is. I would say that when you're learning Spanish, if you're a Brazilian speaker, if you're a Brazilian or that is Portuguese speaker, you won't need much grammar. A little bit, yeah. I wouldn't even say it's inevitable, but I would say it's acceptable, healthy, important, right? But not as much as English, for example, or even quote unquote harder languages, considering Portuguese as your L1, as your first language, like German or even Chinese or Japanese, But that's it, It's at the end of the day, it's all a matter of explaining things, I think I consider a healthy thinking, a healthy mindset. I don't like much this word. It's been misused recently, but it's interesting knowing like, hey, in Portuguese we speak this way and in English we speak that way. We're both trying to say and saying the same thing, but we're going through different routes, all right? And having the knowledge of this, in my opinion, will only benefit you, will only make your understanding of both languages richer, okay? And again, by doing that, you're inevitably talking grammar, okay? But every time you're considering a feature, okay, or a specific characteristic of a language, no matter if you don't name it, like, hey, it's a pronoun, hey, it's a conjugation, or it's a verb tense. Even if you don't name it, it's grammar, okay? The structure of the language is the way the languages behave. I don't even know if behaving, is the right way to talk about language, but it makes sense to me. But every time we're talking about a language working out and evolving, why not? But basically, the way the language is, in practice, it's grammar, whether we like it or not, whether we admit it or not, okay? Again, just to close it off, grammar is not everything, even if you're a linguist, a language enthusiast, it's not going to be 100% of the process, but it's interesting knowing the functionalities of each one of the language, the pieces of languages, the language characters. Why not, right? Like verbs, like adverbs, there are deeper grammarian, okay, grammatic points, right? Yeah, but these ones you don't really need at all as a student, as a learner, as someone who's just learning the language to speak. All right, so that's all for today. I see you in the next episode. Bye bye, take care.